Let's now dive into the first one of the three segments that we have scheduled for today. In this first segment, we will focus on sustainable development and we'll try to figure out the role of sustainability, of the sustainability agenda in this very challenging market environment. Joining us for this segment, we have Ms. Alexandra Brand, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Syngenta HighTech Global Company Syngenta Group. We also have Ms. Tessa Jacques, who is the President of the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. Next up, we have Ms. Ursula Waldman, who is a Skills, Enterprise and Community Development Project Specialist at Atlantis Special Economic Zone in Cape Town, South Africa. And last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Yewande Sadiku, the CEO of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission. So welcome everyone to this first panel discussion. We have about 35 minutes for this segment, so I will encourage our speakers to keep their first intervention within 5 minutes so that we can have a lively discussion and also answer questions from the audience in the second part of the panel. So let me start with you, Ms. Brand, as you are the only representative of the private sector in the panel. Let me start with you by introducing Syngenta. Obviously, it's a leading global provider of agricultural science and technology with about like 28,000, correct me if I'm wrong, 28,000 employees in 90 countries. How has sustainability become part of your decision process over the years?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me and a warm welcome from the world of agriculture. So the corona situation actually has demonstrated many of us how fragile actually our food production system is. I think many of us first time ever experienced in their lifetime that supermarket shelves could be empty when we disrupt these sort of value chains which deliver from the field and from the farmer into our way how we procure food and purchase food for our families. And it's very obvious that climate change and biodiversity loss are posing an even greater challenge to the food system. 70% of the farmers today already give us the feedback that they see the impact of climate change on the way they need to grow our food. So sustainability in my industry, in this sector of food production, has risen in importance, especially due to COVID. While it was important before, but I think we have now a collective humankind experience that the food systems are at risk and we need to do something about it. So Syngenta made actually during the COVID time the commitment to invest $2 billion into breakthrough innovation for a more sustainable agriculture. And we've been embedding this commitment into the way how we decide about on what do we invest in research and development, in acquisitions, in our production footprint, and certainly also where do we invest. Give you an example. We have a commitment to reduce Syngenta's carbon footprint by 50% to stay underneath the Paris Climate Change Agreement. So all areas which can provide us with decarbonized energies from where we would put our operations, these locations certainly get an advantage that we can live up to our commitments. The second impact COVID has had on us was that we are very clear that we are not living anymore in a world of political and economic convergence. We are actually living in a world of decoupling. It's our new reality. And it's not anymore about tariffs. It's about non-tariff trade standards. So everywhere where a global company like ours can find conditions with really, matching standards for our products, the way we are regulated, will have an advantage because that sort of location will have the biggest advantage for us to be able to supply our products in a free world. So that's very worrying actually for us. We are ready to invest. We are ready to build back better. But definitely we need to strengthen global institutions who hold these standards like FAO, the World Trade Organization, and also OECD countries. So that's really an ask to this community, and I'm absolutely happy to elaborate more on that in the discussion.
That's fantastic, Ms. Brand. Let me just have a quick follow-up question for you. What has been your experience, if any, in dealing with investment promotion agencies, and what would you suggest them to, any adjustment that you would suggest them to take to better embed sustainability in their investment promotion strategies?
Yeah. There are meanwhile a couple of really, really good standards available, reporting standards for the private sector and companies, which we would be very happy if the investment community would continue to support that. This is, for example, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD, where leading companies have actually been able to better quantify the risks and the opportunities on their business from climate change. Or what I've been just mentioning, the Science-Based Target Initiative, which helps companies to really go on a journey to stay underneath the Paris Climate Change Agreement. These sort of standards, reporting standards, follow real actions from companies to invest differently. And I do think the investment community, if they are supporting these standards, can really get into a position that, things like special economic zone and so-called ESG impact investments go hand in hand. And that's where I think we need to get to.
Okay, thanks again for your first remarks. Let me now bring in the perspective of Atlantis. My bad, I introduced Ms. Ursula, but we have Mr. Pierre Vaux, who is the CEO of the Atlantis Special Economic Zone in Cape Town. He managed to join us, so welcome, Mr. Vaux. So Atlantis is a special economic zone that since its designing has had this explicit vocation to attract investment into green technologies and create obviously employment for local population. What has been the response of investors so far, and do you expect COVID-19 to bring a lot more opportunities for your green investment model, or to become more of a challenge for it? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? In South Africa, obviously, COVID affected the economy just as badly as in other parts of the world. So we had to dig deep to find different ways of making the SEZ sustainable. But special economic zones have a great advantage of offering a robust avenue for business to rebuild their businesses, particularly in a green tech manufacturing, especially.
I think, Pierre, we lost you for a second.
Makes it easier for business to get involved. It mitigates their risks. And then obviously, when it's easier for business to become part of an SEZ and they can see their income statement and their balance sheet looking stronger through the different mechanisms you offer to them, then obviously they're also more inclined to work more at the community, work more at poverty alleviation. So the Atlantis SEZ was always a very strong industrial manufacturing SEZ. We swung the emphasis very much now to the green tech economy. And I think we're in a good position to make a positive impact through business, through profit, on community development and poverty alleviation in an area that has seen some serious social decay over the past 10 to 15 years. So we believe that the SEZ has got some elements in it that enables it to offer a robust mechanism for manufacturing, green tech manufacturing business to get involved in the SEZ, which gives it a competitive edge comparing to getting involved in any other industrial parks in South Africa or in Africa.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Vaux. Just a brief follow-up question. There is a big debate, unfolding debate here, at least in Europe, also in North America, of green economic recovery packages designed to support economic recovery, particularly in those sectors labeled as green sector, sustainable sector, etc. Do you want to give us a feeling of what is the debate in South Africa, and do you expect government be supporting to investment into sustainable green growth, and therefore to be also do you expect there to be also a spillover effect for Atlantis?
It's a good question. As you know, I think in many parts of the world, the green economy and striving towards a stronger green economy was something that sort of was modern and was sort of the hip thing to do. But these days in South Africa, we see it as an absolute crucial part of economic development going forward. And part of the tax incentives offered are actually based on providing tax incentive for green tech manufacturing industry in the SEZ. So my personal view is if you can get a recipe right in an SEZ of around 124 hectares, which is not big, but if you can get the tax incentive and the whole recipe right to establish a strong green tech manufacturing zone, then you can easily take that blueprint and apply it somewhere else in South Africa or even in Africa. So the incentives offered to the SEZ is not only around tax incentives, which is purely a financial tool, but also around green tech investment to make that green tech sector in the SEZ much, much stronger. And we hope it could become a blueprint for other industrial parks in South Africa and also in Africa.
Okay, great. A couple of very interesting points. We can come back to those later. But for the time being, thank you, Mr. Vaux. And let me now bring in the perspective of Ms. Tessa Jacques, the president of the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, connecting from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Welcome, Ms. Tessa. UNCTAD estimates that if you want to fully meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we should invest globally, and particularly in the developing world, $3.9 trillion every year through 2030, which is an incredible amount of money, an incredible challenge. So from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Caribbean region, what are the challenges to mobilize investment that help progress the sustainability agenda, and how have IPAs in the Caribbean region been approaching and addressing this issue?
Colleagues, friends, good afternoon. For us here in the Caribbean, it is still the morning, so good morning from the Caribbean to all. It's warm. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you some thoughts on COVID-19, its impact on the Caribbean investment, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the ever-evolving role of investment promotion agencies. At the height of the COVID crisis, when it was now seen, when actually now we see it as the first wave of infections during the months of April, May, and early June, the Secretariat for the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies polled firms seeking to better understand the impact of the crisis on their investment. 484 firms responded to the survey, and the majority represented the tourism and agro-processing sectors in the region. At the time, 48% of the respondents had to close their physical offices and operations. 47% had to halt production in some products and or services. 46% of respondents had to temporarily cease all operations. 39% changed the nature of their daily operations, and 35% reported that they had to use virtual platforms to facilitate working remotely. This was in June. The situation worsened for most, and with most of the businesses regionally being mandated to actually physically close. The most severely affected were the tourism industry, obviously, and the outsourcing services. Now, the impact on the Caribbean has been devastating, as it has been for a lot of other places, and has adversely affected our attainment of the SDGs. Now, the survey also asked firms for a critical question regarding their outlook. Most respondents indicated that in the short, medium, and long term, they would need financing to support business continuity, so including payroll and debt refinancing, and most importantly, to support new ways of doing business, including digitization and adjustments in logistics. The second area of importance to our firms in the Caribbean in terms of their outlook related to the need for market intelligence. Approximately half of the firms place a premium on information. Now, these two pieces of data provide the IPAs with critical content for the development of strategies that can assist investors in making investment decisions in the future and on investing in SDG projects. So access to financial resources is important. It was important prior to COVID and even more so now. So how can we help investors spread the risk and reap returns? In the Caribbean, we've turned our focus to the diaspora. to equity and impact investors as solutions to this challenge. Investment is linked to perceived risk. So we've realized the importance of the business environment and its capacity to support investment decision-making, increase investor confidence, and lower perceived risk. So focus on the business climate has become a priority for us. And then there's the need for information, market intelligence. How can we ensure that we are providing the right information in a way that investors need this data with speed, but accurate and timely information? So the packaging and preparation of investment projects now takes center stage.
That's great. Fantastic. Very brief follow-up question. So very insightful figures. It kind of really gives us a feeling of the kind of like the magnitude of the challenges that firms in your region are facing. Where do sustainability, what kind of role sustainability can play and sustainable investment project and sustainability in investment promotion can play against the backdrop, again, of a very tough and challenging market environment?
So given the grave socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 and the expected continued adverse impact into the near future, it is incumbent on IPAs to focus even more so now on investment projects that will mitigate the adverse impact of COVID-19. It has not reduced the importance of IPAs, but heightened our relevance as facilitators of change and a critical ingredient to the attainment of the SDGs. So the way we see it within CAIPA, a strong, robust sustainability agenda is more than ever the way of the future. Attracting investments is about the development of our territories, about job creation, creating wealth, all whilst preserving our natural habitat. So therefore, the focus is on projects that create decent work and economic growth, reduce poverty and hunger, sustain good health and the well-being of the population, promote good education, amongst others. So I'm definitely looking forward to elaborate more on this if there's questions. And thank you very much, Jacopo.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tessa. Let me now bring in our final panelist, Ms. Yewande Sadiku, the CEO, as I mentioned earlier, of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission. Ms. Sadiku, how there in Nigeria have you been trying to embed the sustainability in the type of investment promotion, in your investment promotion strategies? And let me also ask you what I asked Mr. Volter. Do you believe that COVID-19 is more of a challenge or an opportunity in the development of a sustainability agenda? Hello, Ms. Sadiku, are you there? There you go. I think that there is we can see you now, but we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you still. There are some connection issues, I guess. Are you still on mute? Okay, while we try to fix your audio issues, I would need some support from our UNCTAD organizers. Let me go back to Miss Brand. I think that you mentioned a couple of very important and vital reporting standards or like global standards that IPA could try to support in their own operation to be able to attract companies of the profile of Syngenta. Have you got any anecdotal experience that you can share with us of a successful dealing that you have had with a particular territory when during any of your specific investment decisions that can be meaningful and can help us understand better the kind of requirements that a global company like Syngenta has to meet when pushing a button on an investment decision process?
So First and foremost, I have to say that my company doesn't have any operations in any special economic zones. So obviously our criteria have been very different in the past, not saying that in future that is subject to change. We invest in agricultural areas which can produce our seeds, which is certainly a very important criteria that we are close to where actually agriculture is done. And secondly, a second part of our operations is chemistry. So we need to invest where we have all requirements from a health, environmental and safety perspective that we can invest into chemical plants. So these are the first two criteria. I was very thankful for the intervention of the UK government here, because we do have a large footprint in the UK in terms of operations. So we have in Switzerland, and both countries definitely provide workforce, high quality workforce, trained people that we can run really sophisticated operations. The positive thing, for example, about Switzerland is that a lot of the energy we procure, we need to run our operations, is actually based on hydropower. So it's really a nice decarbonized way of getting energy. That is definitely different for the operations we have in China, which has been really favorable, for example, from an export policy perspective. But on the other hand, we procure certainly energy which is based on coal, and which we know we must make changes towards that procurement. And there we are teaming up with other companies who are in the same chemical park, because there we organize the chemical parks, to make sure that the energy we procure for our operation will be over time more decarbonized. And this is really important, and that's, for all here my fellow panelists who look for promoting investments into special economic zone, it's really important for companies that you provide energy supply which is decarbonized in future, and really decarbonized not from offsetting the carbon footprint of the energy you provide, but really comes from renewable energy sources. I do think that will be an important criteria. I mentioned export support that is continuing to be of importance for us, that we do not use, the locations where we invest in for local needs, but definitely also have good logistics infrastructure and supporting export policies that we can really make our investments, for a global business rather than just only a local business. And I do think, for all of the support countries give companies to invest in the respective zones, I do think countries can demand from companies to live up and report on the standards I mentioned on climate change and carbon footprinting. So I think it's a give and take equation, so that companies really give back when they get these sort of favorable conditions to invest.
What is the kind of work that you also do with your stakeholders in the places that you are active? I mean, like your suppliers or any other stakeholder in your ecosystem. How do you ensure that also on your value chain there is a level of sensitivity towards sustainable development goals, either they be in the energy sphere, in the gender equality sphere, in the labor rights sphere, etc.
Yeah. So our most important stakeholder is actually our customer, who is the farmer. We have been working with the farmers who supply us, because we have supply from farm on the seed space, that we have 100% fair labor standards with all the 40,000 farmers we work with who are supplying us. That has been a 10 years program, and it creates some lighthouse projects in the respective community, because we can show when we work with these farmers that it can be done, fair labor standards, fair wages, no discrimination, no child labor. It can be done, and farms can be run profitable with these sort of standards, which certainly has an effect on the entire village. So that's one example. The other example is when we work with our customers, our farmer customers, for example, on biodiversity management. We have biodiversity loss all over, and farmers can actually do the lot with the way they manage their land, with the way they manage also marginal land, to provide field margin management, to provide habitats for ground breeding birds and insects. There's a lot of knowledge we help farmers to understand to create these biodiversity corridors for nature to flourish adjacent to agricultural operations, and that it doesn't is a contradiction between flourishing nature and productive agriculture.
Okay, that's great. I guess the role of agriculture in promoting sustainable development, particularly the role the role of companies like Syngenta in pushing for more sustainable and efficient agricultural technologies is definitely key in your own industry and sector to add this to improve the sustainability profile of the whole food value chain. But let me now try to go back to Ms. Sadiko. She should be better line. Let's try again. Ms. Sadiko, are you there? Oh,
yes,
that's fantastic. We can hear you very well. So again, as I asked before, do you want to bring to the panel the perspective on Nigeria and how you have been trying to embed the sustainability elements in your investment promotion strategy?
Thank you. Thank you very much. One thing that COVID has demonstrated is a greater need for sustainability, but also for inclusivity. If you look at many investment promotion metrics, even the metrics that UNCTAD use, when we talk about investment promotion, FDI, we talk about FDI in value terms, in terms of the quantum of dollars that have translated, whereas COVID has demonstrated that what is more relevant is FDI in the context of the number of jobs that are created and how well spread those jobs are. So we believe that increasingly the domestication of value chains, or great parts of value chains, and for us in Nigeria, because of the size of Nigeria, because of the disparity, because of the wide number of states we have, is the need for subnational investment promotion. But COVID has also demonstrated, because the competition for capital is much stiffer now than it was pre-COVID, the greater need for investment facilitation, and therefore for countries like ours, the need to accelerate reforms that relate to doing business. But from an investment promotion perspective, we had identified 4 broad things that the investments that we think should meet. We think they should be responsible, we think they should be inclusive, we think they should be balanced, and we think they should be sustainable. But COVID has demonstrated it is because of the large number of people who don't have jobs but have livelihoods that are dependent on going out every day to earn their daily wage, that we need to do a lot more domestication of value chains. And from a government perspective, I think it also underscores the greater need for impact. Profit is important, and I believe from a business perspective, profit will always be important. But it is also important that profit that does good for mankind, because we find now the reality of COVID is that if it is your problem, it may ultimately become mine as well. So the connectivity, we're separate, but we're also connected in many ways. But it is the need for sustainability and impact. And then a different way of looking at FDI, not just from value perspective, but in job terms.
Very interesting perspective. Thank you for that. I think that this element of inclusivity measured through job creation is really key. Also from a geographical standpoint, you mentioned the subnational IPAs. So a follow-up question would be what has been the role of your national organization in promoting the establishment and the development of subnational investment promotion agencies or offices?
It's incredibly difficult because we have 36 states that are fairly autonomous. So driving that message of the importance of investment promotion at subnational level to the chief executive, the governors at subnational level, to increase, their understanding of the role of investment facilitation is even more important now. And one of the things that we were able to bed down during COVID was the articulation for all the 36 states in Nigeria of the competitive advantages that each of the states have and the investment objects that the governors want to promote, so we can better focus our energies on promoting the things that are important at subnational level rather than the things that are most important at national level. So the national, if you like, is an aggregation of nationals rather than the national define and then cascading down to subnational level.
Okay, again, very interesting. Thank you also for your perspective. Before asking my last question to Mr. Vogts, let me also encourage the audience to share any question for the panel through our chat, to the chat that you can find on the right of your WebEx platform. So, Mr. Vogts, let me ask you, Atlantis promotes investment into green technologies, but how do you make sure that your investors in their operation, they also stick to reasonable standards of sustainable development goals when it comes to producing their goods, when it comes to dealing with their labor, when it comes to sourcing their energy, and so on?
So just to mention that our strategic plan for the company actually uses the 8 Sustainable Development Goals as a point of departure. So I see a SEZ very much as something that starts from a policy point of view, where the Sustainable Development Goals kind of form part of your point of departure, having a policy in place. But as you rightly say in your question, which I'll try to answer, needs to find its way into practice. So this kind of policy that one needs to get done at a broader level needs to find its way into practice, and a good avenue for this practice is the SEZ company. So obviously, when one comes to the green aspect, one needs to ensure that when you receive an investor application, that the product that the investor proposes to manufacture is a green product. And that's quite easy. I think one can find good criteria to apply to determine whether an electric car or solar panel is actually a green product. What is difficult to determine, though, is the process that is used to manufacture that electric car or solar panel. Is that process actually a green process? And that sometimes is a very, very difficult question to answer. So what we have in place is a set of criteria developed by the national government or the National Government Research Institution, and we apply those criteria on an investor-by-investor basis to determine if the actual final product is a green product. Fairly simple to do, but even more important and very difficult to do is to determine if the manufacturing process and the kind of energy used actually a green product. So 80% of the energy used in South Africa at the moment comes from coal. That's not green at all. So you may find that the solar panel is manufactured as a green product, but the manufacturing process is fueled by electricity from coal. So we have a set of criteria in place that we apply in-house in the SEZ to determine whether determine 3 things: to determine whether the actual final product is green, if the manufacturing process to get to that product is green, and also applying green criteria in-house to make sure that the actual SEZ, in terms of its own power generation and water generation, if that is actually green. And for that, we use a set of criteria. But in the end, we still try and determine any investor application case by case by applying those criteria as best as we can. The challenge we have is that you can't be too lax in the green criteria, but you may find yourself in 5-10 years' time have a brown industrial park. That's not what you want, but to apply those criteria as consistently as possible to ensure that in 15-20 years' time, it is still a green tech manufacturing SEZ.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Pierre. I think that we have time for just a very last couple of points. We have an interesting question from the audience from Ms. Rosario Galvan to all the panelists, but I guess particularly to Ms. Tessa and Ms. Alexandra. How can countries with infrastructure continuously impacted by climate disasters be equal partners for global companies like Syngenta? So maybe first Ms. Alexandra, and maybe then Ms. Tessa, if you want to add anything to that.
I think it's a really difficult question. I mean, we see climate change at work. Like, I give you a concrete example. Russia breadbasket. Southern Russia is kind of the breadbasket of entire Northern Africa, because that's where the serious exports are going. And we are getting the feedback from the farmers there that they see climate change at work. They have concerns about soil health, soil fertility, drought, water supply, to continue to grow that crops for exports. And certainly infrastructure will play a large role, because if they would need to move kind of into different geographies with food production, well, you need to build also infrastructure for that to continue to support Northern Africa, which due to climatic conditions cannot at the moment feed themselves. So I do really think we need to look at what can we best do in this real challenge in Northern Africa to bring agricultural productivity up in a climate smart way, which will be a challenge. And at the same time, what can we do in where at the moment Russia is producing to keep production in that space? We don't want kind of the agricultural frontier to move to get into areas where agriculture is not happening today. So what can we do to make agriculture more climate resilient? So I really think we need to look at it jointly, country by country. Ideally, food is produced most locally. I think that's the most climate-friendly food. And climate change poses a challenge, as I was just highlighting in terms of Russia, but also an opportunity, because we are innovating for actually, more drought-tolerant crop varieties, which we never had. So with these sort of innovation, we might be able to improve agricultural productivity in areas where we weren't able to improve that in the past. So I really think it's, working country by country to see kind of what innovation is needed, what new technologies are needed to react to the situation.
Fantastic. Thank you for these insightful remarks. Ms. Tessa, we really have to wrap up, so you have the final words for this panel. We got 1 more minute, so the floor is yours.
And Alexandra for her remarks on this. And I do think that the approach needs to be country by country. Here at CAIPA, one of the things that we have done in the past, because of where the Caribbean is located and how it's prone to certain climate disasters, we've started to look at high-tech agriculture instead of continuing with the traditional way of how we harvest. So in the past year, in the previous year, we were supposed to continue more actively this year. COVID has halted that a little bit, but we definitely are in the midst of trying to see how we can introduce more high-tech agriculture, more that will actually be more climate friendly, and how to better do. A lot of our territories are so small that it is important for us to look at how to maximize production with very little resources. So I think, but it is a country by country approach, like Alexandra said.
Okay, well, we would need hours to discuss extensively this issue. I think that this very last point about being able to do more with less resources, because we all know that the budgets are being squeezed, the government budgets are being squeezed, and competition for investment is heating up. I guess that this the strategy and the recipe to manage to being able to do more, also from a sustainability standpoint, with less resources, will be key moving forward for the success of IPAs and a successful partnership between IPAs and private companies moving forward. So let me again thank all the panelists for this insightful discussion. Ms. Alexandra Brand from Syngenta, Ms. Tessa Jacques, Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, Pierre Vaux from Atlantis, Cape Town, South Africa, and Ms. Yewande Sadiku from the Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission. Thank you again for your comments.
Jacopo, can I make before we sign off? A quick comment before we sign off.
You have 20 seconds.
Thank you. I'd like to, on this, panel, challenge UNCTAD and challenge all of us. When we talk about FDI and we report FDI, how can we look at FDI from a jobs perspective rather than from an FDI perspective? How can we change the way that we report FDI so it translates to something that has a different meaning for countries on the ground? Thank you.
Okay, I also appreciate your compliance with my 20-second prescription, but very, very, very good point, and definitely a key point in the way FDI is reported, value, measured, and the way its impact is assessed. So thank you also for these remarks. This is really it for this first segment on sustainability.